Hello there, and welcome to day 103 of A Film a Day, with me, Jordan Woodley. And as you can see, my layout is quite different than it's been previously. As I've mentioned numerous times now, I think. I will have to adapt the show according to, whatever's going on in my, whatever's going on in my actual life, to maintain the daily releases. So for the next couple of days, this may be the setup. We'll see. I'll be playing around a bit, so it might not necessarily, but here we are. Something alternative. So now that we have leaped the BAFTAs, and of course with the addition of The Sound of Metal, I thought I would take two things really. Both related to me taking a bit more of a break from the intensive amount of work I've been doing recently for this, and the release and the length of videos and the intensity of content. So for this week, for the rest of this week, I thought I would one, try and do more contained videos. This one might not count because I have a lot to say about this film and of course this setup, and two, that I would also give it a bit of a theme. And because horror is something close to my heart, I thought I would give it a horror/thriller theme to the week. So, the film I decided to watch today was the 2010 Matt Reeves film, Let Me In. Now, when it comes to horror, one sub-genre, or one focus within the genre that I particularly like is the vampire film. I find the mythos and the concept of the vampire in cinema a really interesting conceit, a really interesting creature to examine. I suppose partly that comes from the fact that, of course, I grew up just at the peak when vampire was the vampire was a prominent feature of film and TV. But I think, from a personal perspective, I think they are a good. I'm interested in the idea of the human predator, the idea of a creature that could be mythological or could be more real world, that is built as a predator or an apex predator for the human species, and how we cope with that and how we mythologize that, and the way that it shifts our interactions with a creature that we can't, that really its function is to devour us. And then I suppose with Let Me In, what's an additional interest, and this is really focusing now, is the child vampire, which within the genre is a really interesting idea, and it allows us to explore as viewers the idea of something that is both dependent and yet I suppose symbiotic, maybe, or leech-like. That a child who is also a vampire would be dependent on the supply of victims, but also still being a predator who feeds, and that strange balance between innocence and monster. Of course, this harkens back to things like there's a great sequence within the novel, I suppose, a great part of the novel of Stephen King's Salem's Lot explores a pack of child vampires. And then with Interview with the Vampire, the section which focuses on Kirsten Dunst as a child vampire is a really interesting examination of a character of the ageless child, and what that does to the psychology of someone that was a human but wasn't fully developed, was a child, but then they continue to grow but remaining a child. And so Let Me In, or rather, and again, this is where the caveat comes in, Let the Right One In, which is the original Swedish film. Was it Yeah, Swedish film. Sorry, I was slightly torn on whether it's Swedish or Norwegian, but Swedish film. Explores the idea of the child who is dependent and yet develops a bond with another child, whilst still being this monstrous creature that kills remorselessly. Now, this was during that period where a lot of films that were a foreign language were being adapted to Hollywood, but almost in a shot-for-shot style of way. And so you end up with things like Let Me In, or The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, and I completely understand the frustration with that. I do, I genuinely do. Because, as I've mentioned in other, foreign language filmmaking should be appreciated and observed, equal to English language films. And, the hurdle of what reading subtitles should only be a small one for most people in watching foreign language films. However, as I've also mentioned, for me, practically with my visual impairment, that's not, a doable thing under most circumstances. And so I really wanted to look at this film, and I do want to talk about Let the Right One In, and I'll cover that. But Let Me in itself, is a good film. It really does do some interesting things and explore some interesting ideas. As I say, it was directed by Matt Reeves, stars Chloe Grace Moretz as Abby, and Cody Schmidt-McPhee as Owen, who, of course, Abby being the vampire and Owen being the boy who befriends her. And I think what also helps this film is the fact that with the 2008 film, there was a lot of discussion about subtext and themes. And despite the filmmaker's intention, the film was discussed under the idea that, there were lots of ideas about whether you could read it at face value, which is about the bond made between a young, isolated boy and a vampire who genuinely develops feelings for him, or whether you're seeing the cycle of grooming and exploitation. That you see Owen in the English language version simply, or Oscar, I believe, is in the Let the Right One In. That is simply the replacement for the older man, Richard, I think it's in Let Me In, who supplies Abby with victims and takes care of her. And I know that the I can't remember if it's the original filmmaker or the novelist for the novel, but hated that idea that it could be read as an abuse, as a manipulation. But frankly, it's an interesting way to perceive the film, and you can see the parallel, the idea of an old man who's dedicated his life with no real explanation to this child, and then upon his death, a new child becomes indoctrinated, and of course it fits into the cult of vampire as well. The idea that, harkening back to Renfield, the idea of the worshipper, the devoted subject. But I do appreciate that there's also something quite gothic romantic about it. It fits into the gothic romance of the vampire, more akin to something like Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula. And the idea that there is something sincere and genuine about the bond. And the idea that you experience it through this boy's eyes. I think with Let Me In, what Matt Reeves really does well is everything we experience, or most of the things we experience, are either perceived by Owen and by Abby. And so we don't even learn certain characters' names. The detective who's trying to find out who's killing all these people, Owen's mother's name, we don't even see Owen's father. Is the idea that, through a child's eyes, these figures are distant. And that helps with the isolation and the fact that the film is really uncompromising. It doesn't present characters in an archetype, you know. It doesn't try to make Abby sympathetic in what she does, and it doesn't try to make the victims deserving of their fates. You know, it makes it very clear that she needs to feed because of her nature, and that these people are simply there. Because they are there. They are what is available to her. And I think that, you know, lesser filmmakers would try to you know, reduce that, but it doesn't shy away from the horror. And when we see her go vampiric, it is horrifying, and it doesn't shy away from that. And yet, the way that we see the bond between Owen and Abby, we actually don't lose. We're made to not lose sympathy for her and for them, and we can see. On some level, you're watching it, you know, assuming you're with the more romantic reading of it, that you're seeing them, you know, you want them to bond, and you want this isolated, lonely, bullied boy to have this kind of angelic guardian. I think Matt Reeves also does really well with the atmosphere. I really got a vibe of the 1980s film Phantasm, the original from it. You know, it has this real gothic, moody, and yet almost abandoned small town structure to it, where you almost feel like you know, this is like the emptiness of the space, and you know the fact that it really feeds into the isolation of your lead, and that there's so few characters and so little interaction, and there's a certain, even in the daytime, which is very seldom. We spend most of the shots at night, most of the film, and even in the day there is this moody, grey kind of atmosphere to it that really, it's genuinely, you know, you never lose that sense of haunting, and I think that's something about this that this film does really well. Even though it is strictly a vampire film, stylistically it transitions across genres, from gothic romance to a ghost film to a slasher thriller, to a cult film. And the idea that it can easily go from one genre to another whilst maintaining what it is, I think really sells this film. And with Matt Reeves specifically, the fact that he's now working on the Batman, I think if he brings this kind of atmosphere to the Batman film that he's making, I think you know, he's perfect hands for that property. And yeah, I genuinely think this is a great film. I understand, because again, it's a almost shot-for-shot adaptation, that it you know, it's hard for it to stand alone, but I do think it does stand alone. It goes great before. I mean, this is Chloe Grace Moretz, who's just during her period in Kick-Ass, so she's, you know, she's still a very young actress. She's a child at this point, and again, she easily switches from a sweet-natured, quite naive child to a genuine monster that is quite horrifying to behold. And as I say, Cody Smith-McPhee, you know, as Owen, you genuinely sympathise with this boy who's so lonely and so isolated, and you know, the victim of endless abuse, and finds this bond, and you can really see his arc. I do think this is a really great film. I genuinely do, and I'm really pleased to have sort of started. I know this is technically not the start of the week, but sort of started this week with this. I think this is a really nice refresher. Thank you for joining me. If you like this video, please select like, please subscribe to the channel, and of course I have over 100 videos now, so please go through my back catalogue if there's any that take your interest. You can follow me on Twitter at Jordan_Woodley, where I'm always tweeting trailers and funny videos and movie-related videos, and of course links to when I do new uploads. Thank you for joining me. Take care.